It started quietly, almost like a whisper across the solar system. Earth's deep space observatories had picked up a faint signal, one that didn't seem natural. At first, the scientists studying it thought it was just another anomaly, something caused by a distant asteroid or a fluctuation in solar radiation. They had seen countless strange signals before, and most turned out to be harmless. But this one was different. It moved with purpose, and it carried a pattern that didn't belong to nature. It was deliberate. It was intelligent. News traveled slowly at first. Only a few scientists knew the full truth. They watched as the signal grew stronger, moving closer, showing no signs of stopping or turning away. It wasn't like anything they had seen in all the years of scanning the skies. The message wasn't words. It wasn't a greeting. It was a challenge. Something, somewhere far beyond the stars, was testing humanity. The feeling in the control rooms was strange, a mixture of awe, fear, and an odd spark of excitement. Humanity was being noticed, and not in a quiet way. Government scrambled. They didn't call it an invasion, because that would imply hostility, but they also didn't call it a friendly visit. For the first time in decades, countries that had fought each other over resources, borders, and ideology began to work together. Satellite networks were shared, communication systems were linked. Scientists and engineers from different nations pored over every detail of the signal, trying to understand its meaning and intent. Every calculation was checked and rechecked. Every assumption was questioned. Meanwhile, ordinary people on Earth noticed nothing at first. Life went on as usual. Children went to school, markets stayed busy, planes flew overhead, and cars filled the streets. Yet, far above their heads, in orbit and beyond, satellites were being repositioned, telescopes trained, and radar arrays primed. Some people began to suspect that something big was coming. Rumors swirled, spreading quietly across social media and the news, but no one had full details. Still, the sense of anticipation was there, subtle but impossible to ignore. The signal itself carried more than just a warning. It was almost like a test. It wasn't aggressive in the way a missile would be aggressive, but it had intent. It was a call to prove humanity's strength, skill, and readiness. Earth's leaders debated what to do. Could they answer? Should they answer? Every expert had a different opinion. Some said retreat, hide, avoid any contact. Others argued that failing to respond would signal weakness, inviting unknown consequences. The decision fell to a global council formed for just this purpose, a team of diplomats, military leaders, and scientists. They met in a secure, undisclosed location far from prying eyes. The decision was made. Earth would respond, but not with words. It would respond with action. Humanity would show its capabilities, not through threats, not through weapons alone, but through courage and preparedness. The greatest battlecraft that humans had built, the vessels that had been designed for defense, reconnaissance, and exploration, were assembled. Engineers worked day and night, checking every system, making last-minute adjustments, and running simulations. These ships were not just machines. They were symbols of human ingenuity and determination. Each one carried hundreds of people trained to do things that most could never imagine. Among the crew chosen for the mission, there was no hesitation. They were not selected because they were fearless. Fear is natural and necessary. They were selected because they knew how to act despite fear, how to focus when the stakes were unimaginably high. Families said their goodbyes quietly, hugs lingering, longer than usual, hands squeezed with unspoken words. Some cried, some stayed silent. There were no dramatic speeches, only the calm understanding that what they were doing mattered, and that it carried risks they might not survive. In the early hours of the launch day, the skies were clear. Observers around the world watched as the first of the Battlecraft rose into the atmosphere. Engines flared, lifting the massive ships above the clouds, leaving trails of light across the sky. People stopped what they were doing, staring upward, feeling both awe and unease. For many, it was the first time in their lives that humanity felt truly united, The ships were not just tools of war, they were symbols of hope, courage, and collective effort. As the battlecraft disappeared into the blackness of space, Earth's population held its breath. Weeks turned into tense waiting. Every sensor reading, every signal intercepted was scrutinized. The crew aboard the ships knew they were being watched, perhaps even measured, by eyes they could not see. Every maneuver, every test of their ship's systems was a demonstration not just of technology but of human resolve. The tension was constant, a quiet pressure that never let up. Inside the largest of the ships, life moved with precision. The corridors were filled with the quiet hum of machinery, the soft beeping of monitoring devices, and the muted conversations of crew members coordinating tasks. There was no room for panic, but there was room for humanity. People told stories, shared memories, and tried to laugh when possible. Even in the void of space, they held on to their humanity. The ship itself felt alive, a blend of human engineering and human spirit, every lever, every panel, every screen a part of a larger purpose. The first contact point was chosen near the edge of the solar system, in the dark zone where planets give way to cold emptiness. It was a place humans had explored with probes, but no person had ever been there. And now they were about to meet something alive, intelligent, and unknown. The feeling of anticipation was electric. Each member of the crew felt it, the understanding that this encounter could define the future of humanity for better or worse. And still, no one faltered. They had been trained, prepared, and inspired by generations who had dreamed of reaching beyond the stars. Back on Earth, people followed every update with bated breath. Every signal received was broadcast, analyzed, and discussed. Scientists spoke carefully, avoiding panic but acknowledging the seriousness of the situation. Families watched together, school children listened in classrooms, and governments coordinated, quietly behind the scenes. There was fear, yes, but also pride. Pride that humanity had come together, that ordinary people and extraordinary technology had been prepared to face the unknown. As the battlecraft approached the designated coordinates, the alien fleet became visible on the sensors. They were massive, unlike anything humans had ever designed. Their shapes shifted and moved in ways that seemed impossible, as if they were alive in a way that humans could not fully comprehend. The crew of the ships felt a mix of awe and tension. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of encountering another civilization at the height of its capability. Even so, the first steps of engagement were careful and measured. Signals were sent, interpreted, and responded to, all under the guidance of humans who understood the stakes. There was no hostility yet, only testing, probing, and the silent communication of power and intention. Every move mattered. Every decision carried weight not just for the crew but for every person on Earth who watched and hoped. In those quiet hours, floating in the void between planets, the crew realized the enormity of what they were doing. They were not just facing an alien fleet. They were representing every person who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond. They were humanity's first answer to the challenge. And though they didn't yet know what would happen next, they were ready to meet it. Not with fear, but with courage, skill, and determination. This was the beginning. The arrival that changed everything. The whisper across space that became a roar. The challenge that would define the courage of humanity for generations to come. And in the hearts of those aboard the ships, and in every person on Earth who watched and waited, there was a single, unshakable thought. Humanity would not back down. Humanity would answer. After the initial shock of the alien signal, Earth moved quickly to gather its finest minds and bravest souls. The realization that a challenge had been issued to humanity was both terrifying and inspiring. It demanded action, and no one wanted to let fear stop them. Every country sent their best engineers, pilots, and strategists to a central command station, a massive facility hidden underground and reinforced to withstand the unexpected. Inside, the air was thick with urgency and determination. Every corner of the station hummed with activity. Screens flickered with star maps, engineers checked mechanical systems, and analysts pored over data from the far reaches of space. The selection of crew members for the mission was painstaking. It wasn't enough to be skilled. The people chosen had to have courage under pressure, the ability to think clearly in chaos, and the kind of endurance that ordinary humans could hardly imagine. They were not heroes by birth but by choice, individuals who had dedicated their lives to protecting their planet. Some were veterans of previous space missions. Others were young prodigies who had risen quickly because of talent and discipline. Each person was tested repeatedly in simulations that mimicked every scenario the crew might face. Every test, every calculation, every small decision mattered because a mistake in space could be fatal. Meanwhile, the families of the crew lived through a different kind of tension. They could not go with their loved ones into space, but their worry was constant. Hugs lasted longer than usual, conversations were filled with unspoken fears, and quiet moments stretched into hours. Yet, there was also pride. These people were, taking a step that few could even imagine, representing all of humanity at the edge of the solar system. They carried not only their own hopes, but the hopes of billions. They knew that even if they never returned, their courage would be remembered. Crew trained day and night. They practiced complex maneuvers, emergency procedures, and communication protocols. They learned to anticipate the unexpected, because in space, nothing could be predicted with certainty. Engineers worked alongside pilots, ensuring that every system, from propulsion to shields to weapons, was ready. They studied alien technology patterns detected from afar, trying to imagine how an intelligent species might fight or respond. Even the smallest detail could make a difference between survival and disaster. The ship itself, the largest and most advanced ever built by humans, was constantly checked, tested, and retested. Every panel, every wire, every control was scrutinized. The ship had to be perfect, because there would be no second chances in the vast emptiness of space. For the pilots, training was intense and exhausting. They spent hours inside simulators, navigating through complex asteroid fields, evading hypothetical alien attacks, and practicing high-speed maneuvers in zero gravity. They learned to trust each other implicitly because, in the void of space, teamwork could mean the difference between life and death. Their days began early and ended late, but fatigue was never enough to break their focus. Even in moments of rest, thoughts of the mission lingered like quiet shadows at the edge of consciousness. On Earth, the rest of humanity watched and waited. News outlets carefully released updates, trying to inform without causing panic. Scientists held press conferences to explain the situation in simple terms, while ensuring that people understood the seriousness. Social media was flooded with discussions, speculation, and worry. Children asked questions that even adults found difficult to answer. Yet through the fear and uncertainty, a strange sense of unity emerged. People in different countries, different cultures, even different languages, shared a common feeling. The entire planet was watching, hoping, and standing together. The final preparations for departure were solemn. The crew gathered in small groups to say goodbye to loved ones. Some left letters to be read if they did not return. Others simply hugged tightly, trying to convey a lifetime of care in a single moment. There was no dramatic ceremony, no fanfare, only quiet understanding and resolve. They were about to take humanity's first step into an unknown battle, and they did so with calm determination. As the launch day approached, the ships were loaded with supplies, fuel, and equipment. Every system was checked multiple times, every calculation double-checked. Even small mistakes could be fatal. Engineers worked tirelessly, often going without sleep, ensuring that the crew could rely on the ship completely. Every moment was critical. Outside, the launch pad stood ready, massive and gleaming in the early morning light. Observers gathered at a safe distance, their faces reflecting a mixture of awe and worry. When the time finally came, the ships began to rise. Engines ignited with a roar that shook the ground and filled the air with vibration. Flames and smoke trailed behind them as the massive vessels lifted into the sky, climbing higher and higher, until they disappeared into the thin upper atmosphere. People below watched silently, feeling both pride and anxiety. The ships represented the best of humanity, but they also carried the most vulnerable, ordinary humans placed in extraordinary circumstances. Inside the ships, the crew experienced a moment of quiet awe. Earth was visible through the windows, a beautiful blue sphere surrounded by black emptiness. It was a reminder of everything they were fighting for. Not power, not glory, but the safety and survival of the planet and everyone who lived on it. Some whispered quiet words of encouragement to each other. Others simply stared in silence, letting the magnitude of the moment sink in. They had trained for this, prepared for this, but no training could fully convey what it felt like to leave home forever, to travel toward an uncertain future. The journey through the solar system was tense. Every sensor reading was analyzed. Every signal received was scrutinized for signs of alien activity. The crew worked in shifts, maintaining constant vigilance. Even small blips on the radar could indicate danger, and no one wanted to underestimate the enemy. They practiced maneuvers, coordinated their strategies, and constantly communicated with the command center on Earth. Each day brought them closer to the unknown, and the weight of responsibility grew heavier with every passing hour. During moments of quiet, crew members shared stories about their lives, their dreams, and the people they had left behind. They laughed when they could, told jokes to relieve tension, and comforted one another during brief moments of fear. Humanity, even in the void of space, was present in small gestures, a shared meal, a gentle word, a reassuring nod. These simple acts reminded them of what they were fighting for, grounding them in the reality of human connection, even in the midst of extraordinary circumstances. As they approached the outer regions of the solar system, where the first alien contact was expected, the tension became almost unbearable. The sensors began to pick up shapes and patterns unlike anything previously recorded. Massive objects moved with precision and speed, signals of intelligence that were difficult to interpret. The crew knew that their first encounter would not be simple or easy. They would have to think, act, and respond in ways that could not be rehearsed. Yet despite the fear, there was determination. Humanity had come this far, and backing down was not an option. The night before reaching the contact point, the crew held a quiet meeting. No speeches, no grand gestures, only calm conversation and planning. They discussed strategies, potential threats, and the unknown variables they might face. They made contingency plans for every possible scenario, even the ones that seemed impossible. In those quiet hours, each person reflected on their place in history. They were not just crew members. They were representatives of every human being on Earth. Their actions could shape the future, define humanity's place in the universe, and inspire generations to come. Finally, as the sun set on Earth for the last time before contact, the ships entered the dark expanse where stars were distant points of light in the void. The unknown lay ahead, silent, vast, and filled with possibility. For the crew, every moment was heavy with meaning. They had trained, prepared, and hoped, but now it was time to act. The first meeting with the alien fleet was imminent, and humanity would face it together, with courage, skill, and the resolve that had carried them this far. Even as they moved forward, Earth remained behind them, a fragile, beautiful world worth every risk. And in the hearts of the crew, there was one thought. Above all, no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together, not just as individuals, but as humanity itself. The journey through the outer reaches of the solar system was long and tense. Every day the crew spent on the ships brought them closer to the unknown, and the silence of space seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. There were no stars close enough to touch, only distant pinpoints of light, cold and unmoving. The crew spent hours scanning, observing, and waiting, knowing that any sudden movement on their sensors could be the first sign of the alien fleet. Despite all the preparation, the uncertainty was almost unbearable. Then, one quiet moment, a blip appeared on the radar. At first, it was just a small signal, something that could have been dismissed as an anomaly. But the more the crew watched, the clearer it became that this was no natural object. It moved with purpose, its trajectory deliberate and coordinated. The shapes grew larger and more distinct, revealing forms that defied human understanding. The crew exchanged glances, a mixture of awe and apprehension passing silently between them. They were finally seeing what they had trained for, what they had prepared for, what they had feared and hoped for. The first sight of an intelligent alien fleet. The fleet was unlike anything humans had ever imagined. It moved like a living organism, shapes flowing and shifting as though the ships were extensions of some enormous mind. Metallic surfaces gleamed under distant starlight, but the light reflected in strange ways, almost as if the ships themselves were alive. Sensors detected energy fields, patterns of movement, and signals that hinted at intelligence and intent. The crew realized that these beings were not just machines. They were highly advanced, capable of thinking, adapting, and responding in ways humanity could only begin to understand. For a moment, silence filled the ship. Not the quiet of emptiness, but the silence of tension, of anticipation, of knowing that the next minutes could change everything. The commander spoke softly, reminding the crew to stay calm, to trust their training, and to act with precision. There was no panic, no rushed movements. Every action was deliberate, every instruction carefully considered. Fear was there, of course, but it was accompanied by focus and resolve. These were humans who had been chosen because they could act in the face of danger, and they were about to prove it. The first attempts at communication began. The crew sent out signals, carefully crafted to demonstrate intelligence without aggression. Patterns, pulses, sequences, messages designed to be understood, at least in part, by beings whose language and thinking were entirely unknown. They waited for a response, holding their breath as sensors scanned for replies. Then, slowly, signals began to return. They were not words, not phrases, but tones, patterns, rhythms that carried a sense of recognition. The aliens were aware of them, and they responded. The response was cautious, curious, and deliberate. It was a challenge, yes, but it was also an acknowledgement. Humanity had been noticed. The first approach was tense. The alien ships moved with speed and grace, surrounding the human vessels in formations that seemed impossible to replicate. The crew marveled at their movements while remaining vigilant. Every motion had a purpose, every position a meaning. The alien fleet was testing them, probing for weaknesses, observing for reactions. Humans, in turn, held their positions, maneuvering carefully to avoid mistakes while sending signals of their own strength and readiness. It was a silent dance in the dark expanse of space, a contest of intellect, coordination, and courage. Despite the tension, there were moments of quiet humanity. Crew members shared observations, noting the beauty and complexity of the alien fleet. One of the engineers remarked on the elegance of their formations. Another joked quietly about how different this was from any drill they had ever run. Laughter was brief but genuine, a reminder that even in the midst of uncertainty and danger, people remained human. They were explorers, warriors, and ambassadors all at once, representing not just technology, but the courage and creativity of humanity. As the distance closed, the first potential conflict became clear. One of the alien ships shifted rapidly, moving toward the human vessels with speed and precision. Sensors detected energy readings that indicated weapons, though not aimed directly at them yet. The crew knew that this was the moment when theory would meet reality. Every maneuver, every choice would be tested. The commander issued calm, precise orders, guiding the pilots to adjust formations, strengthen shields, and prepare for any possible outcome. The tension was almost physical, a weight pressing on every shoulder, but the crew responded with training, focus, and trust in each other. The first engagement, if it could be called that, was not violent. It was a test. Energy pulses swept past. The human ships, harmless at first, designed to measure reaction times, strategy, and coordination. The crew dodged, adjusted, and responded, proving their readiness. The alien fleet was not trying to destroy them yet. They were learning, observing, and testing. The human crew realized that intelligence and bravery were just as important as firepower. Every decision mattered, and every moment of hesitation could be costly. In the command center, the tension was broken only by the constant flow of data. Charts, graphs, and signals filled every screen. Analysts spoke quietly, interpreting what little they could understand about the alien movements and responses. Every shift in pattern, every subtle change in energy output, was recorded and analyzed. It was like reading a language no one had ever spoken, a puzzle that required intuition, skill, and courage. And every person in the room understood the stakes. This was not just a test for the crew. It was a test for all of humanity. Despite the danger, the crew maintained moments of reflection. They thought of Earth, of families and friends waiting for news of the countless generations who had dreamed of reaching the stars. They reminded themselves why they were here, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to represent their planet with dignity and courage. This mindset kept them grounded, focused, and human in the midst of a situation that could easily overwhelm. As hours turned into days, the first real understanding began to form. The aliens were not acting randomly. Every movement, every pulse, every pattern was deliberate. They were assessing skill, courage, and creativity. They were testing humanity's ability to respond under pressure. And the human crew met the challenge. Maneuvers were executed flawlessly, signals were sent and interpreted with care, and the crew worked together as one unit. It was the first demonstration of what humanity could do when united, focused, and courageous. The tension remained, but it was now accompanied by a sense of respect. The crew realized that these aliens were formidable opponents, and that the encounter was as much about learning and understanding as it was about proving strength. Every observation made, every signal recorded, would be invaluable for the future. They were witnessing something extraordinary. First contact not as a simple greeting, but as a measured test of intelligence, courage, and capability. Even as they prepared for the next phase, the human crew maintained their humanity. Conversations continued, small jokes were shared, and quiet gestures of comfort and reassurance passed between them. The ship, the vessel that carried them across millions of kilometers of space, felt alive with the energy and determination of everyone aboard. Each person was part of a larger story, one that extended beyond fear and uncertainty, one that defined what it meant to be human in the vastness of the universe. Then came the moment that changed everything. A sudden shift in the alien formation indicated a decision had been made. Energy fields flared, patterns of light rippled across the void, and a new signal appeared on the human sensors. This time faster, stronger, and more deliberate. It was not yet an attack, but it was a clear message. The test had intensified. The crew tightened their focus, moving with precision, executing maneuvers they had practiced countless times. There was no panic, only calm action guided by experience, training, and courage. In those moments, the crew felt the weight of their responsibility more than ever. They were not just individuals aboard a ship. They were representatives of all life on Earth. Every decision they made, every action they took could have consequences far beyond their own lives. Yet despite the pressure, they did not falter. They acted with intelligence, skill, and bravery, proving that humanity was ready to meet the challenge, even in the face of beings far more advanced and unknown. As the first true exchange of signals and movements ended, both sides paused. The aliens had tested, the humans had responded, and now the vast silence of space returned, heavy but filled with understanding. Humanity had passed the first real test, not by defeating, but by demonstrating courage, intelligence, and determination. And as the crew looked out at the alien fleet, they realized something profound. The encounter had already changed them, shaping their understanding of what it meant to represent Earth, and what it meant to be human in a universe full of unknowns. The silence of space was shattered in an instant. What had been careful observation, cautious maneuvers, and measured responses now erupted into something far more intense. The alien fleet, after days of probing and testing, had made its move. It was not a reckless attack, but a calculated strike designed to push humanity to its limits. Energy beams, pulsing like lightning in the darkness, streaked across the void. The human crew had trained for this, yet nothing could fully prepare them for the sheer scale and speed of what they were facing. Inside the Orion Vanguard, the largest human battlecraft, every alarm blared, every sensor flashed, and every crew member sprang into action. Pilots gripped their controls tightly, eyes flicking between screens, tracking the movement of alien ships and predicting their patterns. Engineers monitored energy flows, shields, and propulsion systems, ensuring that every system worked perfectly. Even in the chaos, communication was precise. Orders were given, repeated, and executed with flawless timing. This was humanity at its peak, focused, coordinated, and courageous, facing a threat beyond imagination. The first wave of alien energy pulses swept past, barely missing the Vanguard. The crew reacted instantly, maneuvering the ship in ways that would have seemed impossible just hours before. The vessel twisted and turned, avoiding destruction by mere meters. Each movement was calculated, rehearsed, and improvised all at once. The ship was more than metal and circuits. It was an extension of the crew's skill, intelligence, and bravery. For a moment, the battle felt like a deadly dance, each side testing, probing, and measuring the other. Every pilot knew the risks. One wrong move could mean destruction, but hesitation was not an option. They moved as one unit, coordinating with precision. Human ingenuity was on full display. Missiles streaked through the void, energy shields flared to deflect alien pulses, and the crew adapted constantly to the unexpected. The aliens were fast, intelligent, and unpredictable, yet humans held their ground. The realization struck everyone. This was not just a test of weapons or technology. It was a test of spirit, of courage, and of the ability to act under impossible pressure. In the command center, analysts called out changes in the alien formations, advising the pilots on how to respond. Every detail mattered: the timing of a maneuver, the strength of a shield, the angle of approach. It was a war of intellect as much as it was a war of firepower. The crew knew that while their ships were strong, they were not invincible. Every decision carried weight. Every second counted. Fear was present, but it did not paralyze them. Instead, it sharpened their focus and made them rely on the skills and trust they had built over years of training. As the battle continued, the scale of destruction became visible. The darkness of space was lit up by flashes of energy, beams crossing each other, and explosions that rippled through the void. Small debris floated past, remnants of alien ships destroyed or disabled. The human crew marveled at the alien technology, even as they fought, noting its elegance, efficiency, and deadly precision. It was terrifying and awe-inspiring at the same time. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, humans did not retreat. Every pilot, engineer, and officer acted as if their very lives depended on it, and in a way they did. The survival of humanity's pride and spirit rested on their courage. Throughout the battle, moments of humanity shone through the chaos. Pilots encouraged each other, calling out reminders to breathe, to stay calm, to trust in their training. Engineers offered quiet reassurances when alarms blared and systems faltered. Even in the darkness and danger of space, there was laughter, brief, nervous, but a reminder that humans were not machines. They were alive, thinking, feeling, and acting together. Every gesture, every word, every shared glance reinforced their unity and determination. The aliens were not mindless attackers. They adapted to every move, countering human strategies with surprising speed. The crew realized that this was not a simple battle. It was a complex exchange of skill, knowledge, and intuition. Every maneuver was tested, every system challenged. Energy beams tore through space where shields were not aligned properly, and the ship shuddered under the force. Yet humans persisted, learning and adjusting faster than the alien fleet anticipated. It was a battle not just of strength but of intelligence and resilience. In the midst of the fight, a critical moment came. One of the alien ships launched a concentrated strike aimed directly at the Vanguard's core systems. Alarms screamed, lights flashed, and the ship shook violently. The engineers reacted instantly, rerouting power, reinforcing shields, and executing emergency protocols. The pilots executed a rapid maneuver, dodging the attack by mere meters. The crew worked as one, each person contributing to survival and success. It was a moment of triumph, a small victory that reminded everyone that human courage could meet even the most advanced threats. Despite the victories, losses were inevitable. Some of the human ships suffered damage, systems failing, and crew members injured. Tension remained constant, but there was no despair. Every crew member understood that this was the reality of facing an unknown, formidable opponent. Pain, fear, and uncertainty existed side by side with courage, skill, and determination. They continued to fight, adapting to the alien tactics, relying on each other and using every tool at their disposal. This was a battle for survival, for honor, and for humanity itself. In the control room, the commander watched the battle unfold with steady eyes. Each decision was deliberate, balancing risk and reward, action and patience. The crew depended on guidance, but they also acted independently, making split-second decisions that saved lives and preserved the ship. The teamwork was extraordinary. Humans acting as one unit, each person playing a vital role in the larger struggle. It was more than a battle. It was a demonstration of what humanity could achieve when united and focused under pressure. Hours passed, and the battle intensified. Energy beams crossed the void like bolts of lightning. Small explosions dotted the darkness, and the alien ships continued to challenge the humans at every turn. The crew felt exhaustion creeping in, muscles aching, minds straining. Yet no one slowed down. Every person acted as if they were carrying the weight of the entire planet, and in a way they were. Humanity was watching, hoping, and counting on them to prove that courage, intelligence, and teamwork could meet even the most impossible challenges. Amid the chaos, quiet moments of reflection occurred. Crew members thought of their families, of Earth, of every person who had dreamed of exploring the stars. These thoughts gave strength, grounding them in the reality of what they were fighting for. It was not power or conquest. It was survival. It was pride. And it was the spirit of humanity facing an unknown universe. Even in the heart of destruction, there was beauty in the courage, intelligence, and unity that shone through every action. As the first battle reached its peak, the crew of the Orion Vanguard realized something remarkable. They were not just surviving, they were excelling. The alien fleet, as advanced as it was, did not anticipate the combination of human courage, creativity, and adaptability. Each maneuver, each decision, and each moment of intuition pushed the battle in favor of humanity. It was not a victory, but it was proof that humans could meet an impossible challenge head-on and endure. Even as the battle raged, the crew maintained their humanity. They shared quiet words of reassurance, small jokes to relieve tension, and gestures of encouragement. These moments, simple and fleeting, reminded them that they were alive, and that their purpose was greater than the immediate danger. They were fighting not just with technology, but with heart, spirit, and the collective will of a species united by survival and courage. The battle began to wind down, though danger was far from over. The alien fleet retreated slightly, leaving the humans to regroup, repair, and prepare for the next phase. Damage reports were taken, systems were restored, and the crew took a brief moment to breathe. They were exhausted but triumphant in a sense that went beyond the physical. Humanity had survived, and in doing so, had shown intelligence, skill, and courage that the alien fleet would not forget. As the darkness of space returned to a tense calm, the crew looked at each other, realizing the magnitude of what they had just experienced. They had faced beings far more advanced than themselves, navigated chaos and destruction, and emerged intact. It was a victory not measured in destruction or capture, but in endurance, intelligence, and courage. And in that moment, every crew member understood that they had done more than survive. They had proven that humanity could meet the impossible without surrendering fear, creativity, or heart. The battle had ended, but the silence that followed was heavier than any sound. The human ships floated in the void, damaged yet intact, their crews exhausted but alive. The alien fleet, after hours of combat and testing, had disappeared from the sensors. No one knew why. Perhaps they had retreated to study, perhaps to reconsider, or perhaps to respect what humanity had shown. For the crew of the Orion Vanguard, there was no time for relief. They had survived, but the cost had been high, and uncertainty hung over them like a dark cloud. Inside the ship, every crew member moved with quiet urgency. Engineers assessed damage to propulsion systems, shields, and weapons. Some parts had melted or shattered under energy beams, and repairs would take time and precision. Pilots recalibrated controls, running simulations to ensure that the ship could respond to another attack if needed. Even the smallest malfunction could become deadly in the cold emptiness of space. Every system, every wire, every panel mattered. The crew worked tirelessly, knowing that their survival depended on it. Amid the technical chaos, there was also a heavy emotional weight. Crew members who had faced danger together now understood the fragility of life in space. They had stared into the unknown, dodged destruction and come through, but the memory of near misses lingered. Some sat quietly in corners, staring at screens, replaying events in their minds. Others shared soft words, comforting each other, acknowledging the fear and relief that coexisted in their hearts. It was a moment of deep human connection, a reminder that even in the most extraordinary circumstances, people relied on each other for strength. The command center remained the heart of the operation. The commander reviewed the last transmissions, every signal, every anomaly, every data point collected during the battle. Then came the final transmission, the one that would leave its mark on history. It was short, simple, and calm, but the weight of the words carried across millions of kilometers of space. Tell Earth we stood our ground. Tell them we fought for every life below those stars. There was no panic, no fear, only resolve. The crew knew that this message would outlive them, carrying the spirit of humanity to those who remained behind. The meaning of the transmission sank in slowly. It was not just a report of victory or defeat. It was a declaration of courage, unity, and determination. The crew had faced beings far more advanced, in a battle that could have destroyed them in an instant, and yet they had stood firm. Their words were a promise, a reminder that humanity did not falter in the face of the unknown. They had fought, not for glory, not for conquest, but to prove that life on Earth mattered, that human courage and spirit could be measured, even by beings from another world. After the transmission, the crew focused on repair and preparation. Systems were restored, one by one energy flows recalibrated, shields reinforced, and weapons tested. Every action was precise, every task deliberate. There was no room for error. Even as exhaustion gnawed at their bodies and minds, the crew remained disciplined. They had learned that in space, fatigue could be as deadly as an enemy's attack. Each person relied on the others, not just for survival, but for the assurance that together, they could overcome even the most impossible challenges. Communication with Earth was intermittent and delayed. Ground teams anxiously monitored signals, deciphering every message, every blip, every anomaly. They knew that the crew had survived the first encounter, but details were scarce. Families waited in silence, unsure whether they would ever see their loved ones again. Yet, even in the uncertainty, hope persisted. Humanity had taken its first step into the unknown and had survived. That alone was a triumph, a story that would inspire generations for years to come. The crew also began documenting everything. Every maneuver, every observation, every signal from the alien fleet was recorded and analyzed. They knew that this data could be crucial, not just for immediate survival, but for understanding and learning from the encounter. Humanity had been tested, and while the outcome of the encounter remained uncertain, the knowledge gained was invaluable. It was a testament to human intelligence, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of understanding in the face of the unknown. Even in these quiet moments of repair and observation, the crew maintained their humanity. They shared meals, told stories, and found small ways to laugh, even in the shadows of exhaustion. These simple gestures reminded them that they were not just soldiers or pilots. They were humans, capable of courage, creativity, and connection. In the midst of a battle that stretched across millions of kilometers of space, humanity remained present, alive, and resilient. As days passed, the alien fleet did not return. No signals, no attacks, no messages. The vast emptiness of space was quiet again, but the tension never fully left. The crew understood that this encounter was only the beginning. The universe was vast, full of unknowns, and humanity had shown its presence. They had proven strength, skill, and bravery, but they had also shown something more: the spirit of life on Earth. That spirit was not to be underestimated. The final transmission became a symbol for everyone back on Earth. It was broadcast to every screen, every network, and every communicator that could carry the words. People listened in silence, absorbing the meaning and weight of what had been said. Tell Earth we stood our ground. Tell them we fought for every life below those stars. The words resonated deeply. Humanity had not only survived, but had faced the unknown with courage and determination. It was a reminder that no matter the odds, human bravery could shine even in the darkest places. Even as the crew continued their mission, they thought of Earth. They knew that their actions had meaning far beyond the confines of their ships. Every maneuver, every decision, every act of courage was a message to the people they had left behind. The fight had not been for conquest or revenge, but for the dignity, pride, and survival of their species. That understanding gave them strength, purpose, and clarity, even in moments of exhaustion and doubt. The ship itself became a place of reflection. The corridors, once filled with the hum of engines and the tension of battle, now carried a quiet energy of accomplishment and resolve. Crew members moved with precision, repairing systems, analyzing data, and preparing for whatever might come next. They were survivors, yes, but they were also pioneers, explorers who had taken humanity's first real step into the unknown and had returned with courage intact. And yet, there was also sadness. The battle had tested every limit, and not all ships or crews had survived. The memory of those lost was never far from the minds of the remaining crew. Every action they took was a tribute to those who had fallen, a promise to honor their courage, and a reminder that survival was never guaranteed. It was a heavy burden, but one they carried with pride. The alien fleet, though gone, had left a lasting impression. The crew realized that they had encountered beings who could challenge them, push them to their limits, and test their intelligence and bravery. Humanity had responded with skill, courage, and heart. The encounter would be remembered not just as a battle, but as proof that humans could meet the impossible, adapt, and survive. It was a lesson for generations, a story that would inspire, educate, and remind everyone that courage and unity were the greatest weapons of all. As the Orion Vanguard continued through space, the crew remained vigilant. They knew that the aliens might return, or that others could appear. The universe was full of unknowns, and humanity had made its presence known. Every crew member understood their responsibility: to survive, to learn, and to continue representing Earth with courage and dignity. Every action, every decision, every heartbeat mattered. They had faced the impossible and emerged with strength, skill, and spirit intact. And in the quiet moments, as the stars moved past the windows of the ship, the crew reflected on what they had achieved. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and overwhelming odds. They had fought not just for themselves, but for every person on Earth. They had sent a message that would endure, a message that carried the courage, intelligence, and determination of humanity into the vast unknown. This was the final transmission in more ways than one. It was not just words sent across space. It was a statement of existence, resilience, and hope. Humanity had faced an advanced unknown force and had proven that even in the most dangerous and alien conditions, the human spirit could endure. The words, "Tell Earth we stood our ground," Tell them we fought for every life below those stars. Were more than a message. They were a legacy, a promise, and a symbol of courage that would never be forgotten. The warships of Earth moved slowly through the dark emptiness of space, the remnants of the battle still fresh in everyone's minds. Silence, once a familiar companion in the void, now carried weight. It was heavy, filled with memory and reflection. The human crew had survived the challenge, but the cost had been great. Many ships had been damaged, some had been lost entirely, and even the strongest crew members bore the invisible scars of the ordeal. Still, they pressed forward, determined to honor what had been achieved and those who had been lost. Every ship became a small universe of its own. The Orion Vanguard, the flagship, hummed with energy, life, and purpose. Engineers moved swiftly through the corridors, checking systems, repairing shields, and recalibrating navigation controls. Pilots ran simulations and trained in zero-gravity rooms, preparing for the unexpected that could still come. Each crew member knew their role, understood its importance, and executed it without hesitation. In the quiet of space, humanity's resilience was as visible as the stars themselves. Outside the ships, the universe seemed vast, endless, and almost indifferent. Stars shone coldly, distant and silent. Yet humanity had left its mark. The alien fleet, though gone, had been challenged, tested, and measured by human courage. For the first time, Earth's people had proven that they could stand as a united force in the void, not through intimidation alone, but through skill, strategy, and the indomitable spirit of their species. This realization filled the crew with pride even as exhaustion and grief lingered. The losses were difficult to accept. Empty bunks, silent stations, and missing voices reminded the crew daily of the cost. Yet each act of survival, every maneuver executed perfectly under fire, every decision made in the heat of battle, honored those who could not continue. Conversations in the corridors often turned to remembrance, quiet stories of bravery, humor, and resilience. Some crew members kept journals detailing the experiences and sacrifices, knowing that these records would serve as lessons for the future and a tribute to human courage. Communication with Earth was still slow, but the messages that arrived brought relief, pride, and hope. People across the planet celebrated the survival of the ships, the bravery of the crew, and the courage shown in the face of unknown danger. For a moment, the divisions of nations, cultures, and languages seemed to disappear. Humanity had been tested as a species, and it had passed. Schools, towns, and communities held gatherings, not in celebration of war, but in recognition of human unity and courage. The crew, though far from home, felt these waves of support and hope, a reminder that their journey had meaning far beyond the void of space. The alien fleet had retreated, leaving unanswered questions in its wake. Why had they attacked? What had they hoped to learn? Would they return? The uncertainty weighed heavily on the crew. Yet, amid the questions, there was knowledge gained. The strategies, intelligence, and resilience demonstrated by humanity were recorded, analyzed, and shared among the fleet. Every observation, every maneuver, every signal was a testament to the ingenuity and courage of the human spirit. Even in the darkness, there was learning, growth, and adaptation. Inside the ships, humanity's essence persisted in small but significant ways. Crew members shared stories from Earth, laughed over small jokes, and comforted each other when fear and exhaustion pressed in. They cooked meals together, repaired equipment, and maintained routines that connected them to life back home. These simple acts of daily life were anchors, reminding them that beyond the battle, beyond the technology and strategy, they were human beings with emotions, connections, and the will to survive. The final weeks of the mission were a balance of vigilance and restoration. The crew repaired ships, reinforced shields, and ensured that every system could withstand further challenges. Pilots practiced maneuvers in anticipation of the unknown. Engineers perfected weapon systems, and command officers strategized for potential future encounters. Each day was long and exhausting, but it was filled with purpose. Humanity had survived, a test unlike any before, and the crew understood that preparation and vigilance were their duty and responsibility. Even amid routine, memories of the battle lingered vividly. Crew members recalled moments when energy beams swept past, the sudden shudders of impact and the quick, precise actions that had saved lives. These memories were not just trauma. They were proof of courage, evidence that humans could adapt and endure under unimaginable pressure. Stories were shared quietly in the ship's corridors, not for recognition, but for remembrance and understanding. The narrative of survival, teamwork, and bravery became a living history among those who had faced the stars together. Humanity's victory was not in destruction, but in endurance and intelligence. The alien fleet, advanced and formidable, had retreated without conquering. Humans had defended their place, shown skill, and demonstrated bravery beyond expectation. Every maneuver executed perfectly, every strategy adapted to meet unknown challenges. Every act of courage had been witnessed by those in the vast expanse of space. The lesson was clear. Survival was not just about power or numbers. It was about determination, adaptability, and the human spirit. As the ships returned toward the inner regions of the solar system, Earth grew larger in the view screens. Blue and green swirled beneath clouds. Oceans glimmered in sunlight, and the familiar curve of the planet reminded the crew of what they had fought for. The thought of home brought relief, comfort, and renewed purpose. They had faced unknown dangers, survived, and now returned to share their experiences. Humanity's place in the universe had been challenged and proven. The crew prepared for reintegration with Earth systems. Reports were written, data transmitted, and lessons organized. Every detail mattered, not only for current understanding but for preparing future generations. The battle had changed humanity's perspective, opening minds to the vast possibilities and dangers of the universe. Knowledge became a shield, and experience became a weapon. Every member of the crew knew that what they had achieved would guide the next steps for Earth's people in the cosmos. Even as they approached home, the legacy of those who had fallen was present. Memorials were planned, ceremonies imagined, and names recorded. Each life lost was honored through remembrance, a symbol of courage and dedication that would inspire generations. Crew members reflected quietly on their comrades, realizing that survival was both a personal achievement and a collective responsibility. The memory of the fallen was never far, a constant reminder of what had been sacrificed for humanity's endurance. Earth awaited, but the encounter had transformed everyone involved. Humans had learned that courage, intelligence, and unity could meet even the most advanced threats. They had been tested beyond expectation, yet they had adapted, survived, and learned. The lessons of the stars were clear. Fear could be managed, danger could be understood, and humanity's spirit could shine, even in the cold, indifferent void of space. When the ships finally re-entered the solar system, the crew observed Earth with quiet awe. It was a familiar home, yet it felt different, smaller and more precious after what they had witnessed. They had seen the universe at its most vast and unknowable, faced a challenge beyond imagination, and emerged with humanity intact. Their eyes reflected not only the beauty of their planet, but the understanding that life on Earth was both fragile and extraordinary. Communication with Earth increased as the ships approached. Messages flowed, questions were answered, and news of the mission's survival spread quickly. Humanity celebrated, not with victory parades or banners, but with quiet recognition of courage, unity, and resilience. The story of the battle, the challenge, and the final transmission became a symbol for all, a reminder that humanity could face the unknown, endure adversity, and prove its worth even in the vast emptiness of space. Inside the ships, life returned to routine, though nothing would ever be the same. Crew members continued to train, repair systems, and share stories. They celebrated small victories, comforted one another, and reflected on the lessons learned. The journey had been long, dangerous, and transformative. Every moment, from the first signal to the final transmission, had tested them in ways unimaginable. Yet they had endured, grown stronger and proven the resilience of the human spirit. In the final moments before docking with Earth's orbit, the crew gathered quietly in the observation decks. They watched the blue planet slowly grow larger, its oceans, clouds, and lands coming into view. Each person reflected on what had been achieved, what had been lost, and what had been learned. Humanity had faced an unprecedented challenge, survived, and returned stronger and wiser. The courage, unity, and intelligence of the human race had been tested, and humanity had passed. The ships touched down safely, greeted by signals of welcome from Earth. Families, friends, and fellow humans waited, eyes full of relief, pride, and admiration. Crew members stepped off their vessels, tired yet triumphant. They had faced the unknown, survived, and brought knowledge, courage, and experience back to Earth. They were heroes not just because they had fought, but because they had represented humanity with heart, intelligence, and determination. Even as celebrations began, the memory of those who had fallen remained strong. Each life lost was honored with remembrance, and the courage of the survivors